What's up, Mike Nowstalgia? Dave here with a review of 28 Years Later, the new post-apocalyptic horror film from Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, starring Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Jodie Comer, Ralph Fiennes, and Alfie Williams. Of course, this is the return at last of the 28 film franchise, following, of course, Boyle's 28 Days Later in 2002, and the follow-up film 28 Weeks Later in 2007, and this is honestly really exciting because, of course, it's Boyle's first movie since Yesterday came out back in 2019. But really, it's great because, it's Boyle's return to this franchise 28 weeks later, not nearly as compelling as the original. And this has always been a franchise, particularly the first one and this new film, that has so much ideas and things to present within the zombie storytelling mold. And that's why it's just, been really impressive. If you think about 28 Days Later, when that came out back in 2002, of course, I think the filmmaking style, really stands out with its intentionally lo-fi presentation, something that was really effective in the theater experience, but when you watch it at home, almost doesn't communicate in nearly the same way, almost coming across as just 480p. Not the best, right? Nowadays, though, now again, 28 years later, Boyle made the decision to shoot this film on iPhone. I think it was iPhone Pro 15, or iPhone 15 Pro, I believe. And that's happened a few times recently, right? Sean Baker's Tangerine, a few Steven Soderbergh films like High Flying Bird. But to do it with a movie this big and this outside and expansive, communicating action, was really impressive, but also compelling and bold undertaking. 28 Years Later is an awesome return for this franchise after nearly 2 decades of being away. Danny Boyle once again back with his unique filmmaking style, Alex Garland in the writing bag, and once again we have another zombie story that's so humanistic and deep and reflective on, greater themes than your average horror post-apocalyptic story goes. The emotional beats certainly pay off at the end, as does the coming-of-age story at the film's core. At the end of the day, it's the intelligence of these films that really compel you, and I can't wait to see the next one just because I have such faith in this creative team. If you think about 28 Years Later, right, like the original trailer, for the first trailer for this film got so much attention and goodwill right away, but we weren't really aware of the dynamics of what this story was going to be. I think a lot of people expected this to be like, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, kicking ass, killing zombies, right? And taking his son out with him, right? Like almost like a lone wolf and cub, Last of Us type story, right? But no, it doesn't end up being that. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is only in this movie in the beginning. I think he does well in the film. His character has a lot to him in a short amount of time, which is great, but it really ends up being a straightforward, in a sense, coming-of-age story about the son Spike, played by Alfie Williams. Alfie Williams is, in fact, the star of this movie. Jodie Comer, Spike's mom, is someone battling some kind of illness, mental illness, physical illness of some kind. And, of course, because we're in a apocalyptic zombie world, 28 years later at that, we don't exactly have modern medicine to help people on this quarantined world that is the United Kingdom. The emotional journey that you go on with Spike and his mom is, I think quite impressive and kind of multi-layered, as Spike learns things about the world and learns things about life that I think we can relate to as people in reality, but he's learning it within the prism of the obviously very dark and difficult world he lives in. The movie also gives you, I think, a really fun subversion to Ralph Fiennes' character, who has an amazing, third act role to play in this film. Obviously, the imagery of him coated in iodine, as he puts it, but you think, he comes across as very, very scary looking, but he's not a villain in the movie. He's actually someone who can offer a bit of knowledge and helpfulness, but more than anything has a more spiritual purpose to his desire to keep staying in the land of the living. The movie also has, I think, really sophisticated way of giving you bits of world building and exposition to really ground the story once again, where we learn that the rage virus has been contained to England, and it has been removed from the rest of Europe, which of course was the suggestion at the end of the second film that the rage virus had been unleashed on the rest of Europe. So they kind of retcon that, or just, move that forward to the sense that now this is where it's happening, and there's these quarantine patrol boats that we end up meeting a soldier, regarding a soldier from Sweden at that. So I think the stakes have been established, and the community that Spike and his parents live in is this, causeway connected island off the mainland, and you get a little life into this type of community, and also a peek into their kind of like societal dynamics and rituals as Jamie, the dad, brings Spike to the mainland to get his first kills, and they have a big rip roaring celebration when they return, right? I think that first journey into the mainland, the meat of the Aaron Taylor Johnson role, I think that's very scary and well done. I really like that. And then, when things break off and you realize what kind of movie it's going to be, and Aaron Taylor Johnson's not going to be in the story too much later, I wasn't apprehensive, but I was curious, like how it's going to go about. But because it ended up being focused more so on Spike's, kind of emotional maturity and growth, I think it ended up really working. I think Jodie Comer does a solid job. I don't think it's the best character in a sense. She's kind of sidelined with her condition most of the time, which involves a bit of like a split personality, or at least losing memory in some regard. But overall, I think the emotional beats really hit by the end, and the movie ends in a bit of a cliffhanger, which is an allusion to the kind of opening scene and tying us into the sequel, which is already in production. Now it's 28 years later, The Bone Temple, which will be directed by Nia DaCosta, once again written by Alex Garland. We do know that Cillian Murphy, of course the star of the original film, was spotted on set regarding that sequel, which actually I believe has already finished filming. I believe it was shot more or less back to back in a certain sense with 28 years later. So that's very exciting, this new trilogy, and it's looking like the movie will be successful enough at the box office from the early returns that we should be able to have confidence in seeing the rest of this trilogy. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I think if you think about like the top level things, right, like 28 Days Later was very much celebrated for being like a allegory about 9/11, and then 28 Weeks Later, warts and all, more about like the Iraq War. And now 28 years later, pretty clearly about Brexit. So what will The Bone Temple be about? I do not know. COVID, perhaps? I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, I think the movie's really good. I think it has the zombie, action that you want. The big alphas, really letting it all hang and all as in their naked selves, I think is both amusing, but you see some gnarly action, very bloody, probably the goriest of all of these movies, if that was possible, but I think so. There's also a lot of, I think, just kind of visual flair and interstitial scenes and vision type stuff, and the movie I think really looks good, and I think it's worthy of multiple viewings. Honestly, once you have more grasp on the plot, you can kind of sit with some of those other feats of filmmaking, so to speak. But yeah, I really like the movie. Let me know, though, what'd you think of 28 Years Later? What'd you like most about it? And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time.